All right, everybody, good morning. Thanks so much for being here. Before I introduce Ben and Alex, just a reminder that this table here of awesome prizes will be drawn at 10:45 this morning. So if you want to buy more tickets, they're at the registration table, and all ticket sales help cover all the costs for ProtoTO. All right, so just to introduce Ben and Alex here. Ben Rosset is a senior project manager at Panda Game Manufacturing, where he guides clients through the production process from the time the project is quoted until the last shipments leave the factory. He's also a game designer. His designs include Between Two Cities and Brew Crafters. Alex Corrao is a pre-press specialist and an account manager at Panda. As a pre-press specialist, he assists clients in the preparation of art files for the manufacturing process. As an account manager, he consults with clients on component/production options and preparing quotations. So please join me in welcoming Ben and Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pam. It's great to be here. Can you guys hear me out there? All right, good. Well, welcome to ProtoTO. And thanks for getting up early in the morning to be with us here on Saturday morning. As Pam said, my name is Ben Rosset. This is Alex Corrao. And we are from Panda Game Manufacturing. So who here has heard of Panda? All right, most people. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Who here has heard Panda, not including hearing it from here? There we go.
All right. For those of you that might not be familiar with us, we are a game manufacturer. So we actually physically make, manufacture, and assemble full board games. A lot of the ones that you see on the giveaway table actually were Panda games. So we do full-scale production and manufacturing of board games. So it's great to see all these designers here. You guys have your prototypes with you. That's awesome. And I'm guessing that a lot of you want those prototypes to get published and to get out and to get into the world. So there's some of you here that might be thinking about running a Kickstarter campaign and maybe funding the game on your own. Anybody? Few people? Okay. There's some people here that might be looking to pitch games to publishers and have publishers publish their games for them. Yeah, okay, great. So either way, this talk will be for you guys, because what we're going to do is take you through a crash course 101 on game manufacturing of what it takes to actually physically manufacture a game, taking into consideration components, costs, and other things that you need to know to prepare your game to either be picked up by a publisher or to be published yourself.
All right. It goes. There we go.
All right. We are going to have plenty of time for questions, so don't worry about that as we toward the end of the presentation. Okay, so a little bit more about Panda. This is our 10th anniversary, so 2007 we were founded. We are a Western managed company with our production facilities in Shenzhen, China, which is in the south of China, adjacent to Hong Kong. We're actually a Canadian company. Our headquarters are in Vancouver. So we own our factory, which means that all printing, all assembly, all quality control is done in Shenzhen at our factory. We're not just a broker, a go-between between other manufacturers in Shenzhen. We are the manufacturer. And we work with all sorts of publishers. We got our start with indie creators. First time, even before Kickstarter was a thing, indie creators at that point were taking out loans from the bank or loans from their family members in order to publish their first board game. So we cover the gamut when it comes to publishers. So if you're an indie publisher looking to make 1,500 copies of your card game, or whether you're Stonemaier game making Scythe, which is a game that we manufacture, we are open to all publishers. Okay. And we are global. So like I said, we are a Western managed company, which means that all of our account managers and project managers like Alex and I are based either in North America or in Europe. We have some German and French-speaking team in Canada and in Europe, and the rest of us are native English speakers here in the United States. And then, of course, we have United States and Canada. And, of course, we have our manufacturing facilities in Shenzhen, and then we also have a support team in the Philippines. Okay. This is us at Gen Con 2016 last year. Our team has actually grown quite a bit since then, probably almost double to what is shown in that picture. But just a picture of our Panda West team, our Western team. And then this is the factory and our team in Asia. All right, so we're going to get into manufacturing in just a second, but just a little bit more about us, some of our publishing partners. So as you can see, we've worked with small, medium, large companies, Z-Man Games, Plaid Hat, Bezier, European companies like Portal Games, Feuerlandspiel, Stonemaier, do everything for Stonemaier. So just a small sampling of some of the publishers that we've worked with over the years. And a few of our games, Scythe, Mechs vs. Minions, Eclipse, Pandemic, One Night Ultimate Werewolf, Above and Below, Manhattan Project, a lot of games that you've probably heard of and played are Panda games. Okay, great. So enough about Panda. We want to talk about manufacturing your games, and we want to talk about you guys. And part of talking about you guys is talking about the game industry, right? So the game industry today is vibrant. The board game industry, everyone says it's going through a renaissance, which I firmly believe. The industry is growing at a tremendous pace. So we see that at Panda. Other manufacturers see that, publishers see that. You can see that in the fact that Gen Con sold out this year for the first time, right? First time ever. They ran out of tickets and couldn't let more people into Gen Con. So you can see how much the industry is growing, which is a tremendous thing. It's a great time to be a game designer. It's a great time to jump into that industry. I always joke that it's the first time in my life I've had good timing, where I'm actually in the right place at the right time. So a lot of those logos that you saw on the previous screen, Bezier, TMG, Stonemaier, a lot of those companies that are kind of household company names now in the hobby side of the industry started out with just one creator and one game, right? Viticulture, which was Stonemaier's first game, was just a random email that came into Panda's inbox one day saying, hey, my name's Jamie and I have this idea for a winemaking game. Could you guys help me out? So it's amazing what can happen in just a few short years with someone in the industry that has that drive, that passion, that desire to make games. And guaranteed there's somebody like that sitting in this room right now. So one of you guys a few years from now will be the next Bezier or the next TMG or the next Stonemaier if that's the route that you want to go. Or if you want to be published, come back 5 years from now, there's a bunch of you guys that are going to have games that are out there that are on these shelves. So at Panda, we understand that the industry really starts from the bottom up. And we love that and we want to support that. So Kickstarter and normal distribution channels, you guys know, are both booming. And something that's amazing to me is that tabletop games account for more than 25% of all the money that's made on Kickstarter. That doesn't include video games. That is just tabletop games. Tabletop games are also the most number of projects in the tabletop game category are funded on Kickstarter than any other category on Kickstarter. So just goes to show how much our industry is really growing right now. Okay, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Alex. He's going to talk a little bit about getting pricing for your game. So if you are looking to actually manufacture your game now, how does that work? Alex is going to talk about that, and then I'm going to jump back in and talk about the manufacturing process.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. So there are a few things that you really want to keep in mind before you're ready to request a quote for all the variety of manufacturers. So there's a few things. So for example, almost one of the important ones, mainly important ones, is how do you want your game to appear on that shelf? Do you want it to have vibrant colors? Do you want it to be, a very large box? All of these certain types of things, that shelf presence, will affect your cost in the long run. Also, what kind of gamers do you want to play? So do you want to appeal to the miniatures game, where you're going to have a bunch of miniatures in your game? Or do you want, are you okay with replacing miniatures with cardboard punch-outs? So things like this. Also, one thing you really want to keep in mind is the MSRP. So when you approach a manufacturer, you want to make sure you have a price in mind to speak with them about so they can kind of work with you to get to that price point that you are looking for. And how do you get that price? So for example, with Panda, all you will need to do is request a quote on our quote form on www.pandagm.com, and you will register for our website and put in your information. It's just an email address, and that's going to be the first step in the entire journey for requesting a quote. And what is that quote form going to look like? It's going to look like this. So when you open up the page, you're going to be able to put the project name in, the number of units. Our minimum number of units is 1,500. So that's something also to keep in mind is how many units do you want to print? Some manufacturers may be a better fit for you in some areas. At Panda, we are focused on 1,500 and up. Underneath that, you'll be able to include different components. So your boxes, your punch boards, your rule sheets, your rule books, any of those components will be there. If you have a component that may not be in our list of sourced components or in a component that you have just thought up, that is okay. Put that in an other section, upload a photo, and you will get worked with to figure out what we can do for that piece. All right. So as an account manager, that quote, that request for a quote, will be sent to someone like myself. We would be your advocate for getting pricing for your game. So we're going to be the first point of contact. So what I'll do is I will get that pricing from our team, and then you and I will get into a Skype meeting and discuss this. So when you get into meetings with an account manager, you want to make sure that you have a few things in mind. You want to have those first three things we discussed, and you want to allow that account manager to discuss with you their suggestions, because they will have your game's best interest at heart to make sure you can get that game to the market. All right? So you'll discuss stretch goals. You'll discuss design alternatives. As I stated before, miniatures versus just cardboard standees. There are a lot of different things that you can do to manipulate that cost to hit that price point.
So what we want to do now is talk about basically what you guys saw in the video about everything that was happening there, all the manufacturing of the mass production of plastics and everything, kind of talk through that process and what it really takes to actually manufacture a game, and how the process works when you would work with a company like Panda. And then we will have plenty of time for your questions and discussion about it. So the basic project life cycle when you go to manufacture your game, right? So maybe you've kickstarted your game and it was successful. You successfully funded on Kickstarter, and now it's time to actually manufacture. So you should have had a quote already, right? You can start working with someone like Alex to submit your quote way before you actually go to Kickstarter, right? So you know what your cost is going to be. And then, so your game has been kickstarted, or it's been picked up by a publisher, and they're going to go through this process. So what does it take to actually manufacture the game? Well, we go through these several steps from kicking off a project to design verification to pre-production, mass production, and assembly and shipping. And we're going to talk a little bit about each one of those. So working with Panda. So every manufacturer will be a little bit different. You're going to find similar ways of working with a lot of the Chinese manufacturers, but what Panda provides is physical samples at every checkpoint. So if your game has wood, if it has plastics, if it has metal, if it has dice, and also for the printed materials, you'll get actual physical samples in the correct color, correct size, correct specifications to approve at every checkpoint along the process before we enter mass production. Thorough approvals and quality control. So we have 3 different approval processes and checks during the production process. One is at design verification and digital proofs, making sure that your files are set up correctly to be manufactured on offset printing machines, those industrial printing machines. The next is sending out a pre-production copy of the game, which is basically one prototype copy or version of the game for you to approve everything. And then we go to mass production. And then the final third major checkpoint, a quality control checkpoint, is sending you one mass production copy of the game, actual full, final, and complete version of the game for you to check over one more time, make sure that this is exactly what you ordered, exactly what you wanted, and then we box everything up and get it ready to ship. So that's a real quick overview of kind of that approval quality control process that we have at Panda. Support and communication from somebody in North America who's a native English speaker throughout the entire process, working with you, guiding you through that process. We said technical expertise. We've got plastics engineers at the factory. We've got wood and dice specialists and engineers at the factory that have been doing this their whole lives and are now doing it for board games and knowing exactly what can be done, what can't be done, making suggestions for how we tweak something, how we change maybe the arm angle of a particular miniature to make it easier to remove from the mold, to reduce your cost, things like that. So we've got teams at the factory with their technical expertise supporting in that. What you're going to need to do, whether you're producing with Panda or another manufacturer, is to provide your files, including the layout and artwork, right? So did you guys get, most of you probably got one of your, the design guidebooks and toolkits when you guys came in? Did you guys get one of these? If not, come back and visit us after the presentation. Our booth is in the back, and we've got plenty of these. So this right here is Panda's design guidebook, right? So this is the Bible when it comes to how to set up your print files for production, what the specifications of all of your print files need to be so that it comes out looking the way that you want it to come out looking in industrial printing on the offset printing machine. So. So what you guys do is provide those files, work with your graphic designer and artist, or if you are the graphic designer and artist, to prepare the files according to these specifications, and then provide any photos or 3D files or sculpts if you have any kind of custom plastics or custom dice that need to be made. And then basically Panda takes it from there and does the rest. And the first step in that is having a kickoff call and doing design verification. So in the beginning of the production process, what will happen is after you've signed a contract, right, your game has been kickstarted and you're gonna make 2,000 copies and you've signed the contract and you're ready to go. So then a project manager like myself will work with you. We'll get on Skype together and talk about the project, make sure that we understand exactly what you want, make sure you understand how our process works. And talk about timelines for the project, how long it's going to take. And then we start design verification, where we bring in a pre-press specialist like Alex, who will review all of your files that you'll upload to us, making sure that they are compliant with our guidebook, making sure that the files can be printed and printed correctly. And once we check all those files and make sure that everything looks good, we will provide digital proofs to you, which is, again, that first quality control checkpoint, where we'll upload our version of the files for you to check, make sure that everything looks good in terms of the color, the size, with all of your files.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. After we've gotten through digital proofs, then the next thing that will happen is pre-production, where we'll make samples, actual physical samples of everything that's in your game. Again, so if you've got wood in your game, dice, plastics, we're actually making physical samples in the right size, the right color, the right shape, sending those to you, air shipping those to you to approve to make sure that they are correct before we start mass production, and then also sending you that one prototype, what we call a PPC, pre-production copy of the game, for you to check that over and say, yeah, okay, this is correct, this is what I want. Or maybe you'll get it and say, you know what, actually, let's make the punch board a little bit thicker. I actually want the punch board to be thicker. Or, you know what, let's make I actually want to lay out the rule book a little bit differently. Or, so I'm going to change the size of the rule book and upload a new file to you. So that pre-production copy gives you the chance to change anything that you want before we actually go to mass production. Okay. In mass production, that is when you've signed off on everything. You've said, yep, these samples are correct. This is exactly what I want. The pre-production copy is correct. This is exactly what I want. Go ahead. Go make 2,000 copies of the game. And then that's what we'll do. We'll go to mass production. So at that pre-production checkpoint, that's really the last point at which you can change anything in your game. Once we go to mass production, we are manufacturing thousands of copies in the game, and at that point, it's not possible to change anything, or at least not possible to inexpensively change anything. So we will do mass production, which generally takes, depending on the components in your game, anywhere between about 4 and 8 to 10 weeks for mass production. If you've got custom dice, custom plastics, it's probably going to be closer to that 10 weeks. Could be a little longer depending on your quantity. If you've got just printed components in your game, probably looking at closer to about a 4-week production time for mass production. And then the first full, final, and complete game that comes off the presses, we will box up, we will shrink wrap, and we will send that to you, airship that to you, and that'll be the first copy of the game that ever comes off the presses. If you ran a Kickstarter, you can do an unboxing video with that copy of the game. But again, it also serves as your quality control checkpoint to check the mass production copy to make sure that everything's in the box. The colors are exactly the way that you expect them to look, that all the materials are the way that they're supposed to look, the right size, the right finishes, the right textures. And that's your last checkpoint to make sure that, yep, everything is good with this copy, so I know that everything's going to be good with the other 1,999 that are coming behind it. And then the final kind of project production, the final process is assembly and shipping, right? So now we've got 2,000 copies of your game that are now having been assembled. We've got the boxes, they're shrink wrapped, they're ready to go, and they're ready to leave the factory and find new homes. And so there's a couple things that can happen at this point. If you do need to do or want to do any kind of safety testing, we can do that. It's usually not recommended and not necessary, but once in a while you might want to, if you're selling to a particular distributor or someone that wants to make sure that the games have been safety tested, we can do that. And then we send the games out. So according to your specific shipping plan.
Is safety testing inclusive of choking hazard?
Yes. Yes. So then we'll talk with you about your shipping plan, where you want to ship these 2,000 units of the game, whether you're going to be working with a traditional distributor, you have a fulfillment company that you're sending them to that needs to get sent out to backers. And with Panda's connections and our expertise in the industry, we can help to recommend that as well. Well, what do you need to do with these games? Well, I've got 2,000 games, but 900 of them need to go to my Kickstarter backers, and the other 1,100, I'm trying to get into retail stores. So we can, you'll be doing some research on your own, but we can also make some suggestions of, well, this is some fulfillment centers that our other clients have used in the past that we might recommend, so check these guys out and help you figure out kind of where those games are going to go and what's going to happen with them when they're done with mass production. Okay, so just a couple more things. We're going to talk about some time-saving tips and some cost-saving tips that you guys as designers can use. And you can use these whether you are going to kickstart your own game or whether you want to pitch your games to publishers, right? Because they're going to be interested in having the lowest possible manufacturing cost. They're going to be interested in not spending money that they don't need to be spending, right? I'll put it that way. So just a couple of tips for you guys. We'll go through this, and then Alex is going to talk a little bit more about the design guidebook and those kits, our toolkits that you guys received, and then we'll take questions. So, so time-saving tips. A few things to think about. First of all, if you're going to work with Panda, and we hope that you do, use that quote request form that Alex talked about. That's the best and the easiest way to get to get the fastest, to get your quote for manufacturing the quickest. So use that quote request form on our website. Mention any game-specific requirements early on. For instance, if you've got wood pieces in a game and they have hidden information, we need to know stuff like that because we need to make sure that's actually difficult to do with wood because wood has got a wood grain pattern and it's different on every little piece of wood. So if your game's going to have hidden information on the back of wood tiles, we need to know that so that we can kind of plan for that early on. If this is your first project, think about keeping it simple. We do have certainly games that have custom plastics, that have metal coins, that have all kinds of higher end, fancier components. But that definitely does extend the timeline of production to have something like custom plastics. We need you guys to either come up with 3D files for those. We need you to come up with, or pay someone to actually do physical sculpts of the plastic pieces that are going to be in the game that we can make the mold from. So just to have in mind that if this is your first game, you might want to think about, well, am I ready to kind of go through that process? Am I ready to pay a 3D designer to do 3D files or to do sculpts? For my first go-round, do I want to keep it a little bit simpler to kind of get my feet wet with manufacturing before I do my kind of magnum opus kind of project with custom miniatures and 90 miniatures in the box. So definitely not to say that it can't be done, but we just want to get the message across that, especially with custom plastic miniatures, those are the most complex type of component that can go into a game. So if you are planning to do that, and especially if you're planning to run a Kickstarter that's got custom plastics, that's okay, but make sure that you get in touch with a manufacturer early on in the process, sending them those design files so that we can take a look at your 3D files or your sculpts and give you feedback on those and help you to make those suggestions that are going to save you time and money. Just know that, especially for custom plastics, you want to talk to the experts as early on in the production process as possible to make the whole thing go as smoothly as possible.
Something to keep in mind also, just because you didn't drop from plastics to maybe a little bit easier of a manufacturing decision with punch-out characters, that doesn't mean the game is going to drop in quality. It's still the same game. So make sure you want to get that game out there rather than having spend thousands and thousands of dollars. Make sure it works with your game.
Mm-hmm. Also, planning shipping in advance is really, really important. Especially for first-time publishers, you need to know what is going to happen with those 2,000 copies of your game once they have been manufactured, right? The worst possible scenario is that we've got 2,000 copies of the game that are finished and ready to go and nowhere to ship them because you haven't worked out your shipping plan. You haven't done the research to figure out who your fulfillment company is going to be that's going to send these games out to your 900 Kickstarter backers. You haven't figured out who your distributor is going to be that's going to help you sell games to retail stores, to sell the rest of your print run through retail stores. So this is stuff that you want to start looking into while you're running your Kickstarter, even before you're running your Kickstarter, and figure out, before you're running your Kickstarter, and figure out what company you might be ready to work with in order to do that fulfillment, right? Again, worst case scenario is your Kickstarter blows up, you've got 6,000 backers, and now you need to make 8,000 copies of the game, and that's awesome, but oh my God, how am I going to get these sent out to my 6,000 backers? You sitting in your garage at home packaging up boxes and sending them off and bringing them one by one down to the post office to send out 6,000 packages is not a good idea. We've had people that have tried to do that. It is not a good idea. So if you are a new publisher, please, please, please think about shipping ahead of time. And again, send us a quote at Panda months before you run your Kickstarter. It's free to get a manufacturing quote, and your account manager can even help you with that early on in the process. Before you run your Kickstarter, we can give you a list of fulfillment and distribution companies that you might want to check out months ahead of time so that you guys are ready on day one when your Kickstarter launches. Okay. Yeah, I think that's good. And then some cost-saving tips, just things to think about while you are designing a game. As Pam said, I'm a game designer myself, and so I'm constantly thinking about manufacturing costs and thinking about making efficient use of the components that are going into my game. And just some things to think about. Using pre-made components, there are things like wood are not that expensive to do custom meeples, but things like dice, for instance, it costs somewhere in the neighborhood of about $700 to $800 for each unique mold that you have for a die, right? So if you have custom dice in your game, each unique dice, not face of the dice, but actual unique dice that has different designs on it, is going to increase your tooling costs. Right? That's a one-time cost that it costs to actually make the steel mold. that the dice are going to come out of, right, with your designs on it. So you might have a game that has 8 different dice, and they're all unique. Well, that's going to be 8 different molds that we need to make in order to make those 8 dice for the game. So, so is it possible to find a way to reorganize those dice so that maybe you only need 6, or maybe you only need 4 different dice designs? So these are just things to keep in mind as you're designing your game, as you're going through that process. Where are the ways that I might be able to save a little bit of money? Optimizing the number of cards in your game is a big one. There are, for poker-sized cards, 3.5 inches by 2.5 inches, or when you get into manufacturing, we work in millimeters, so 63 millimeters by 88 millimeters is a standard poker-sized card. And there are, does anybody know how many of those come on one printing sheet?
60?
Close.
Close, very close. For bridge-sized cards, that's correct. Yep. 54.
Correct.
For 54 cards. So for standard blackjack or poker-sized cards, 54 come to a printing sheet. So that's why you'll notice that if you turn over the back of a game box and you look at the number of cards that are in a game, oftentimes you will see multiples of 54. Oftentimes a game will have 54 cards in it, or 108 cards in it, or 162 cards. Why do so many games have exactly 108 cards in them? The reason is because it's exactly 2 full printing sheets, and it's the most efficient use of those printing sheets to use a full printing sheet. So if you have a 109th card in your game, we need to bleed that over onto a 3rd printing sheet for 1 more card, right? So knowing that, hey, I've got 109 cards here. Can I get rid of 1 of them to get down to 108? That's going to save me money in the manufacturing process.
And keep that in mind across, say your game has multiple decks of cards. You have like items, and you have one that's characters. All of those will be pushed onto all of your sheets if they are all the same sized card. So if you have, say, 30 of one, and then those will all 30 of one type of card. The next card after that 30, the 31st is going to be the next deck. So make sure if those all get pushed down, you may end up at the last sheet having 1 card on the last sheet. So it's all going to get pushed onto those several sheets. It's not going to be, okay, we'll put 1 deck on another sheet, 1 deck on another sheet. It all gets pushed on for the entire process. So you have to keep that in mind. If they're all getting pushed on, we may end up having a full empty sheet at the end. So you want to do that math.
Okay. Just a couple other things. Think about cardboard inserts versus plastic inserts. Generally speaking, cardboard inserts cost about half of what plastic inserts cost, so that's a good way to save money. Is maybe, do you really need a custom plastic insert? Do you want to do a cardboard insert instead? Usually costs about half. Being aware of the footprint of your game. Nobody likes to buy a game on the shelf and open it up and have it be 90% air, right? They figure, well, I just spent all this money on this big box and there's not that much inside of it. It costs you a lot more money to do that. So there's a lot of considerations that go into the box size that you choose. One of them is shelf presence. What is it going to look like in the store? Another one is just manufacturing cost, right? So anytime that you are making a box that's bigger than you actually need to store the components in it, it's adding extra cost to the game and is going to be adding extra shipping costs for you as well, because those bigger boxes take up more volume and it's more expensive to ship.
We're getting there.
Okay.
Cardboard.
Yeah, so designing components with multiple functions. Do I have disks or cubes that can be used for several different types of resources in the game so that I don't have to have 30 blue cubes, 30 red cubes, 30 green cubes? Is it possible to just kind of use one to track resources in different ways? If you've played Terraforming Mars, they actually do a good job of that, because they just have those like silver metallic looking little cubes, but they're used for all the different resources, right? So on all the different sections of the player mat, you have this same kind of silver cube that's used in the different sections of the player mat to track different resources, but they don't need 50 silver cubes and 50 purple cubes and 50 orange cubes. They're just using those silver cubes, right? So they've cut down on the number of them that are needed in the game because they're using the same color to track all the resources on the player map. Okay? And of course, doing it right the first time is, again, starting early, bringing Panda your designs, having us consult with you on what is feasible, what is not feasible, making sure that you're designing things that are going to work the first time.
All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and talk about really quickly about these toolkits that you got. So this is a really quick highlight of some of the components that we have done at Panda, which you will see some samples of in these toolkits. So we have full character models. We have custom dice, for example, these bullet dice, which are really cool. And we have metal coins, and then different shaped plastic pieces. So when you open up this toolkit, you are going to notice a few different things. So you'll see metal coins at the bottom. You're going to see plastic little panda. You're going to see snap-on rings. A lot of these things we want to give you the idea of, all right, so I have, maybe I want to use this type of dice. Maybe I want to use, maybe I want to use a custom dice. Maybe I want to use these wood pieces. Maybe I want to use something like this. So we want to give you guys that idea already in your head. That's why we give these to you guys. So when we go into that toolkit, you'll also notice a box of cards. Those cards are actually examples of different core types of the cards. So for example, you have ivory core and black core, which are going to be a little bit more sturdy. Now something to keep in mind, people may think, oh, ivory core, if I go gray core, then it's going to be a lower quality card. That is not true. The quality will stay the same. It is the durability that is affected. So keep that in mind. If you have a game where you're throwing around cards, maybe you're going to want to go with a black core or an ivory core. If people are just going to be kind of placing cards a little bit naturally, you're going to want to go with gray core to save a little bit of cost there. You're also going to see, if you don't mind grabbing this really quickly, you're going to see a plastic sheet like this. This is going to show different sizes of different cards on here. So you can see, mini cards, blackjack cards, tarot cards, bridge cards, all on here, so you can get a good idea of what those sizings are. Mm-hmm. Same thing with, we got some punch board dials on here. We got a bunch of stuff that you can mess around with to see which may better fit your game. Guidebook, there it is. And then what we gave you is this design guidebook. As Ben also said, I am also a pre-press specialist. So, little pre-press knowledge here. 98% of projects that come through at Panda experience delays at design verification. 98. And that is because each manufacturer is going to have their own very specific manufacturing requirements. So what we did is we put together this guidebook to make sure that you can go step by step to make sure your files don't experience delays. As a pre-press specialist, I will look through those files for all of these requirements listed in this book. Mm-hmm. So I bet if you go through the entire book, there will be little chance of any delays. Mm-hmm. So there are things in here that you'll notice for different program recommendations. So InDesign for layout, Illustrator for your vectors, and Photoshop for your raster images. We got ways that you can, the correct ways to upload them. We have things on our website, like templates that you can download to make sure you are correctly utilizing margin and bleed. Each company will have their own requirements for these types of things. So you want to make sure you stay on top of that and do it ahead of time. So when you decide you want to work with a manufacturer, you're not sitting there, for an extra couple weeks with a graphic designer trying to figure out how to get these requirements set to go. So make sure you utilize the design guidebook. There are a lot of other things in here that are very, very helpful. So definitely take a look through. There's also some advice on things like spot UV, if you want that nice little shine on your box, if you want foil, if you want a lot of different things. That's all going to be inside this guidebook. If you have any questions about that, feel free to ask me in the back. Like I said, I'm also a pre-press specialist, so I can answer any questions in that area. Mm-hmm. All right. We're going to be here all weekend, as I just said. So if you have any questions at all, feel free to ask. We're about to open up the floor to any questions. But if you want to, talk to us about your game for a little bit, we'll take a look and see if we have any suggestions for you. We've already had a few people come by, and we hope we've been helpful.
Yeah, feel free. We are in the back. If you did not get a toolkit or a design guidebook when you checked in, we've got some extras in the back. And like Alex said, we'd be happy to take a look at your prototype. If you want to bring us your prototype in the back, we can talk through some production and component design ideas, and we'd be happy to do that this weekend.
All right. So now we're going to go ahead and open up to any questions that you may have. I think we could turn on the lights now at this point.
Yeah, we can turn on the lights, and I think there's a mic. Yeah, thanks, Pam.
Hey, thanks for the great presentation. So something that I see a lot in Kickstarter is if you have a runaway success and you have to print a lot more units, your delivery time doesn't necessarily scale properly, or your cost doesn't necessarily scale properly. What do you guys find in terms of, if you go in thinking you're going to sell 1,500, 2,000 units, and then now you got to sell 6,000 or 8,000 units or something? Mm-hmm. What kind of impact does that have on lead time for delivery and cost? Is it proportionately increase or proportionately decrease when that product count goes up?
It's definitely not difficult to scale up in terms of our manufacturing. We do print runs as small as 1,500 and as big as, we've done 100,000 before, right? So it's not going to, if you go from 1,500 to 3,000, it is not going to take double the time to manufacture your game. The time is going to stay pretty much the same, actually. And your per unit cost is going to go down. So when you get a quote from Panda, we start at 1,500, but we can give you a quote for 1,500 units, 2,500 units, 5,000 units, 10,000 units. And you can see right there what's going to happen to my per unit cost at those different quantity levels. And then if your Kickstarter starts blowing up and you go, oh, I need a quote at 20,000 units now, we can do that. I think where some companies get into trouble is, okay, well now I was only planning on maybe 1,000 of these or 1,500 of these. I wasn't planning on making 10,000. So now my whole distribution plan has to change because I was going to use a fulfillment partner that can fulfill 500 copies, but they can't really do 10,000. They're just not set up for that. So I've got to find a whole new fulfillment partner now, or I've got to find a whole new distribution partner. I've got to figure out where I'm going to warehouse these 10,000 copies of the game as opposed to the 1,000 that I was planning on warehousing. And so you see a lot of companies getting into trouble on Kickstarter with that kind of success, that now I don't know what to do with all these physical copies of the game. So that's another reason why you want to think ahead of time about what happens if my Kickstarter blows up and I end up wanting to make 10,000 copies of the game. Do I have a plan for that? And you definitely want to plan for success early on. But to answer your specific question, from our point of view, no, it does not take twice as long to manufacture 3,000 as it does 1,500.
Just as a follow-up to that, if you're a miniature-heavy game, in terms of tooling, I know tooling has a certain number of strikes it can take and stuff. Is that something that can cause the price to go up if you have a lot of miniatures and you're dealing with a lot of continuous hits to those tools?
Yeah, so you're talking about custom plastic miniatures, right, and needing to create molds for those. So again, your per unit price is going to go down a little bit if you have more units. It depends on what's in the game, right? So your tooling cost, tooling is a one-time fee, one-time setup cost that are charged anytime we need to make a mold for anything. So whether that's custom plastics or whether that's custom dice. If you have one miniature in your game, like in the toolkit you got, there's one little plastic panda figure. If that's it, if you got one miniature in your game, your tooling costs might be $2,000. I'm just throwing out a ballpark there, right? If you've got 30 different miniatures in your game and they all have a different figure to them and they're all unique, we might have to create 4 or 5 different molds or more to hold those 30 miniatures if they're all kind of large, right? So your tooling cost could be $15,000 there. So that is something that you want to take and keep in mind. And again, early on in the process, you're getting quotes for that, so you know what that's going to cost. But to speak to your direct question, Panda only ever charges tooling costs once. So our molds, we can run hundreds of thousands of units in games through that mold, right? And we only charge you tooling costs once. So you might make 3,000 copies of your game now. and then you might want to come back to us for 10,000 copies next year because the game's doing well and I'm going to reprint it. Those tooling costs do not get charged again. It's a one-time only fee. And I think in my career at Panda, which has been 2.5 years, but I think even going back to the start of the company, I think one time I have seen a game being printed enough where those steel molds actually needed to be replaced. Once in 10 years. So it's probably not something that you need to worry about happening as a realistic possibility. If your game blows up and you end up doing 1 million units of it, yeah, we're going to need to replace those molds. But you know what? That's a good problem to have.
There are
It's a
worse
good problem to have.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I have a quick follow-up to his vote.
Yeah. They can hear you. Max.
Is there a maximum time frame between printing? So let's say you print 2,000, and then a year later you say, oh, I can make another 2,000. Can you call back a year later and say use all the exact same files and make it again?
Yeah, did everybody hear that question? I'm not sure if the mic was on. Yeah? Is the mic on? Okay, good. Yes. Yes.
There is, you can, at a certain point, I believe it's about 1 to 2 years, you will get, if you have printing plates or if you have tooling though, you will get contacted by Panda and they will tell you, hey, are you still using these? To make sure, because there's going to get a point where
Yeah, it has to, right?
they have a shelf life, right? Especially with printing plates, those can completely kind of get ruined, especially you're going to be printing with them, you're messing with different chemical balances of inks, so you want to make sure we'll contact you and say, are you still doing this? If not, then we might need to move forward, or these plates might go away.
But yes, we print, Panda makes Pandemic, right? And so there's been many printings of Pandemic over the years. And when you're ready for another printing, you come back and we just pull those printing plates out and do another printing.
Quick question. I met some of your folks at Origins, and I thought they identified themselves as sales reps, not project managers. Is that the same thing, or do you have separate levels of contact? These are folks based in the States.
We do have our sales team, which is a combination of our project managers and account managers.
Okay.
And those are going to be your points of contact.
So
as
were
we
these
discussed.
account managers in the
Yeah, it would most likely be account managers.
Got it.
You probably met, I was at Origins too, you probably met Carrie or Joe, maybe? Carrie. Yeah, Carrie. Yeah, she's an account manager, like Alex is an account manager.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Can you describe a bit more about the costs associated with manufacturing pre-production units?
Manufacturing what production unit?
They're pre-production units?
Oh,
Because those are the ones that will probably be sent out to reviewers and such before a Kickstarter campaign.
Right.
So they're costs that designers will probably have to pay up front, maybe excluding any games that have miniatures, because the tooling costs on that will be much more. So
Go ahead.
So when it comes to pre-production copies, you are not going to be getting like 10 pre-production copies. We don't specifically focus on prototyping. That is going to come down to, it's a different animal, right? We're utilizing different machines. We're going to be laser cutting rather than using your die cuts. It's going to be requiring a lot more man hours. So we don't specifically focus on prototyping. So when you do get that PPC copy, it's going to be maybe 1, 2, 3 copies at the most. So if you do want to maybe send out a bunch of them to reviewers, then you will need to go through another company such as GameCrafter, for example. But these copies, those pre-production copies, that price will already be included within that first initial contract and priced out.
Okay.
So it's not going to be, oh, hey, we're going to do a pre-production copy, now pay us extra money. That's not going to be how that goes, don't worry. But it will be included, and you'll see that when you receive your contract, all of these stipulations will be on there for you.
Yeah, we actually, as Alex said, and I just want to repeat that we absolutely recommend somebody like the GameCrafter if you want 20 copies to send out before your Kickstarter launches to get them into reviewers' hands so you can have reviews on your Kickstarter page. GameCrafter is a great company to do that. They can do it. They can do it more cost effectively than we can do it. Because we specialize in print runs of 1,500 or more. So if you do want those copies for review copies before your Kickstarter launches, go to GameCrafter, get 20 copies made, send them out to reviewers, get your Kickstarter funded, and then come to Panda, and we'll make 1,500 or more of them for you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Right behind
When
me.
you mentioned before about stretch goals, right? If you could just define that and what you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're looking at stretch goals, something to keep in mind, you don't want a giant list of stretch goals. Mainly because, one, from Kickstarter standpoint, you kind of get it to like, okay, we made $100, let's hit a stretch goal. You don't really want a stretch goal every $100 or like a million stretch goals. One, it ends up not really being cost effective towards when you're pricing your game out. It's going to take a lot of man hours to price a lot of these stretch goals. So things to keep in mind, if you want to go from like a basic flat card to one with linen embossing, things like that won't really cost that much extra. So when you're looking at stretch goals, you want to make sure they're going to add quite a bit to your game. So for example, making that jump between a cardboard insert to a plastic insert. Changing components to where you can add, maybe you want to change your box to a magnetic box. Maybe you want to jump up from punch-out characters to 3D characters in plastic injection molded characters. So you're going to want to make sure you have an itemized list kind of prepared. You're also going to be able to sit down with your account manager to discuss these. So we have a lot of experiences under our belt to where we can kind of identify certain things. We'll be able to take a look at your game and say, well, if you take this component and upgrade it, this would be a good stretch goal. If you want to maybe add foil stamping to your box, so it gets really, really fancy. You got spot UV, you got raised embossing. You want to have, if you have a character board, maybe you want to make it double layered like they have inside. So things like that. You want to make sure they're going to add a lot more, because in the end, you're going to have people opening the box. If you think really everyone's going to notice that extra $100 if that card is linen embossed or not. It's those little things you want to make sure that they're big enough to where people can go, you know what? I want us to hit this stretch goal because it's going to be a great additive to our game. That's what you really want when you're taking a look at stretch goals.
Hi. Oh, yeah. I wanted to ask a quick question about Kickstarter copying. If you guys have seen that, or how you guard against, how people guard against that, and time to market, things like that.
Kickstarter copy?
Like Kickstarter exclusive type things?
It's more that something will get really big on Kickstarter, and then someone else manufactures it before the original one actually gets to market.
Oh.
Do you have an example of
Yeah.
that?
Oh, well, if you haven't heard about it, then it's probably not happening in board games.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Did they really? Wow.
I mean, I guess that can happen. If somebody is doing that, they're probably not part of the hobby board game industry, because it's a small industry and you'll get a really bad reputation really quickly if you do anything like that in the hobby board game industry.
Something to keep in mind, however, from a legal standpoint, you cannot copyright or trademark mechanics for board games. That is very, I do not speak specifically as any legal representation, but from personal experience, as someone trying to work on a game and trying to trademark, you always want to make sure you protect yourselves and things like that, but you cannot trademark mechanics. So it's very difficult to protect those specific things. So my recommendation, this would be more of a personal recommendation, have legal representation for you. That's something always to keep in mind, especially if you're working on a product in general.
There's one over here.
Sorry, one quick one. Sir. Oh,
Go ahead if you have follow-up real quick.
Yeah. Oh.
Hi.
Okay.
I have a question concerning timing. By your experience, how much time does it take in the development phase where you're figuring out things all the way up to like the first mass production print, and then from mass production, the first mass production to shipping? You said it was about 6 to 8 weeks, right?
Yeah, so...
But before that, like from the first
Sure.
email that you received to that first mass production print, how much time does it take usually?
Sure. Well, that is mostly dependent on how good your files are.
Yes.
To be completely honest. So from the point at which you sign a contract, let's say, okay, the Kickstarter funded, I'm going to sign a contract today. How long is it going to take for my game to be produced? Well, the first thing that happens is we go through that design verification phase where we're reviewing your files, right? So this really is the driver. Design verification is really the big driver of how long it's going to take for your project to get made. If your files are perfect or close to perfect in accordance with our design guidelines the first time you upload them, we can get through design verification in a
Within
couple
the
of
week.
weeks.
Yeah, even sometimes within the week if your game is not super complicated. But as I said before, about 98% of our projects experience delays there. So delays could happen. They could end up at months because some people you may end up, it's like, no, we want it a certain way. We want to make sure we want to make sure that the pre-press specialists are your best friend. They want to make sure that that game comes off the line the way you want it to look. They have experts, we have experts at our company that make sure your game, we work with the machines. We know how it's going to print. So the reason we have this design guidebook is to make sure that they come through the exact way you want them. So as Ben said, those delays are more expected around that design verification phase.
So you said that 98% of people don't get it out in a week. So on average, what does 50% of your what does your average customers take?
It truly depends. So if you're looking at a project, let's say you have a box, a rule book, some cards, and a game board, for example. Within about a week and a half, we can make sure we can take a look at if it goes through, perfectly, we can get it done within the week. Average, I would say about 2-3 weeks, and that's including myself taking a look at the files, looking, preparing a report for you. Let's say we have issues with all of the files. Let's say you have rich black text, which is going to be a problem when it comes to CMYK printing. Let's say you have images that are too low in PPI, so we specifically require 300. So you have issues here. So that means I have to prepare a report, send it out to you. If you have, for example, a lot of people do have a separate graphic designer, and really quick, if you are using a separate graphic designer, when you hit that manufacturing point and you're discussing with a pre-press specialist, put your graphic designer in contact with the pre-press specialist. Cut out the middleman, have those files directly being the person who's working on those files talking to the pre-press specialist. So I would say an average about 2 weeks if it's fixed that second time. And then they have to hit that pre-production phase, which is going to be dependent on how many components there are for your project, right? And Ben, I think you can attest to a little bit more of that.
Yeah, on average, I'd say probably 3 weeks for design verification, 2 weeks to make the pre-production copy, 4 to 8 weeks for mass production, depending on what's in your game and depending on what the final, what your quantity is. And then another 2 weeks for assembly and shipping. So 3 weeks for design verification, 2 weeks for pre-production, that's 5. Let's say 6 for mass production, that's 10 or 11. 2 for assembly, we're up to about 12, 13. That's a good guidepost to use, about 12 weeks maybe, from the time that you sign a contract till the time the games are ready to leave the factory.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
sure.
And that's if everything is like good.
Related to that, when are your heavy times of year, and how much does that push out timelines?
I would say probably around earlier the year, right before you hit that convention time. So I would say probably around June.
Our heaviest time of the year is from about March 1st up through Gen Con. Or up through even toward this time of the year when games are getting out for Essen Spiel, which is happening in Germany in October. So March to September is our busiest time of the year, and then September through March, it slows down.
Yeah, it's really dependent on that convention season and hitting those benchmarks for all the separate conventions and then the holiday season. So.
They'll often have multiple tiers, and at a higher level tier, you might get metal coins, but that's only going to some of your backers. So I might be printing less than 1,500 of those, even though I'm getting a total of 1,500 copies. How does that work? Do I have to have at least 1,500 of each tier as a separate product, or can you put that in some of the boxes but not others?
Yeah, a good question. The answer is no, you don't have to have 1,500 of each tier. So you might have a Kickstarter version that takes the base game and adds in a few more components. And you might want 1,000 of the base game and 500 of the Kickstarter version. That's fine. We can do stuff like that. So that's something that you would talk to your account manager about while you're pricing out the game and figuring out how that's going to affect the overall price of those different versions. But yeah, we can split it up.
And when it gets to that point, it would end up adding, say you had 1,000 regular games, and then you had 500 of the deluxe version. That would add up to 1,500 units.
Right. So you care more about units as opposed to like all units being exactly the same.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have a bit of a trick question, I think.
And Alex will take that one then.
All right. So
Thanks, Ben.
say there was a component that you guys didn't produce. You could do everything else, but there was one particular component. Could you receive that from another manufacturer and then integrate it?
So likely it wouldn't be, if there's a component, say we don't specifically produce, we do have a sourcing department that will look for these components. We most likely would not be working with a separate manufacturer. Mainly that is because we want to focus on making the entire game in-house. If it is a component, say for example, you have a timer that we don't specifically manufacture, but we have members of our team who focus on sourcing those components and bringing those in to make sure we can package your entire game in-house. But if you're looking at a custom plastic component, if you're looking at something that has never been done before, we'll try to figure out how we can get that done for you. Obviously, if it's something that is crazy off the walls, in space, this is physically impossible, we're going to let you know. We're not going to be, something to also avoid is yes men. You don't want someone who's just going to say, yes, 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 we're going to get this done. You want someone who's going to provide you, say, you know what, this is going to be difficult. It may be extremely expensive to make, but here's a solution. So that's something that we would be doing at Panda as an account manager. I would take a look at your component. If you had a photo of it for me, I would take a look and I would talk with our team, see what we can do, and then try to find a solution there.
Hey,
Yes, sir.
sort of related to the whole timings thing. So like in the video game industry, there's like companies that try and avoid certain times to release their games. Do you have any advice for like times that you would want to release your game or avoid times that you want to release your game?
Avoid times.
Well, I mean, in the hobby game space, hobby tabletop game space, releasing around convention season is pretty common. So if you want to, release, if you're going to Origins or going to Gen Con and you're going to have a booth there, that's a good time to kind of release a game. And then also getting it out for the Christmas shopping season certainly is big. But other than that, I do hear that like January is a bad time to release a game. It's just kind of a dead zone because everyone spent all their money at Christmas, and so no one has any money left to spend during January. But I would say that I'm not an expert to answer that question. I would talk to publishers, to existing publishers that have released games before and get their opinion. I see one on the side of the room over there. I'm not sure if he wants me to point him out there, but I see someone from Renegade Games over on the side of the room, Scott Gaeta, who can probably answer that question better than I can. Yeah, so generally I think, spring, summer, convention season is when a lot of energy is happening around the tabletop hobby space, and that's a probably good time to release a game.
Think about also, when would you want to buy a game? Any other questions? Right over there.
Can you speak to some manufacturers having like things you can't go outside of, like you have to commit to a certain way of manufacturing? Like one would be barcoding, like Amazon has barcode restrictions versus like Barnes & Noble. You can't even sell in their store if you don't match their barcode. Do you have any idea about that type of stuff?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what.
Yeah,
can you kind of say what your question is, like whether?
Like, is there any like companies out there you can't sell your game there because you didn't meet a certain standard or
So that's
quality
really
control or their barcode standard, like you didn't use the proper barcoding or?
So a lot of the time when it comes to spaces like that, that's going to really come down to on your end.
Yeah.
And that's going to come down to making sure, we have our design verification when we have our design guidelines. If these companies have their own design guidelines, that's something to speak to with your manufacturer. So say, for example, for a specific barcode, you want to make sure the person who's working on your files knows about that barcode. And that's really going to come down to the person who's prepping those, not really the manufacturer. Because if I'm a pre-press specialist and you send me files and they're well within this, I'm going to go ahead and send them through. I'm not really aware of where you may be sending it or where they may be into. So that's going to end up coming down to your preparation and making sure that they are manufactured to the specific requirements that you are needing to be matched for where they're going to end up going.
You are right to check on that, though,
Yeah.
because I do know that Amazon specifically has specific requirements. They will not accept certain products unless they meet packing requirements and the cartons, and they have to have certain labels on the cartons and on the on the pallets that go to Amazon. And so you definitely, if you're thinking about selling through Amazon for sure, you want to check into that.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of customers that do sell through Amazon, so we certainly and our games are perfectly fine to sell on Amazon. So that is not generally an issue. You want to contact Amazon and make sure you know those requirements ahead of time.
And for the more general requirements like the CE mark and choking hazard mark, we actually do have a note in the guidebook as well. If you have any inkling that your game might have an issue with choking hazard is something that we've been really working through recently and trying to figure out. There's actually this tool that you can actually place your components in. If you actually Google it, there's a tool you can buy to place your components in to make sure and test it if it's a choking hazard. But there are specific requirements for those markings. For example, the choking hazard mark needs to be exactly 10 millimeters in diameter. We actually have those available on our website that you can just download, and they're in the correct format, so you can just add those directly. Same thing with the requirements for the CE mark. Those are also labeled in here. So the general things that we will have that idea already. And as a pre-press specialist, if I don't see those on your game, I would be able to let you know about that. Anyone else? I think.
All right.
I think that's it. Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, if anyone else has any questions, as we said, we'll be here all weekend in the back. Thank you guys so much for coming in early and listening to our presentation. And
thanks very much. Have a great time this weekend.
Thank you, guys.